Whew, it is hot out here. Good morning. So we are in zone 8A, Alabama. And so what I want to do today is give an update on my fertilization, the products that I'm using, and my schedule that I anticipate doing. So first, I have my Learning as You Grow notebook. And so at first this was in one of those plastic type of folders, but then I realized I really didn't like the folder per se, and so I found one of my old binders that I am using. So now I have my notes in here. And so I'm going to my vegetable section, and something else that I had mentioned in a prior video was that I wish I had like some little tabs or whatever. And so I had some smaller, what do you call those things, sticky notes. And so I just made some little tabs across the top so that I can easily access everything. So the first thing I want to highlight, going to my note section, is the type of fertilizer that I am using and why. So just a quick backstory. So my last growing season, I primarily utilized fish fertilizer, and that can only supply you with so much nitrogen. And so in doing some research, even though I have been gardening for, I know it's been over a year now, we may be in year 2, I can't remember. But even with that, I was still using the fish fertilizer. And then this season, spring season, what I'm really learning is that yes, you want to fertilize your plants because they require the nutrients, but I don't necessarily have to just use the fish fertilizer. Like I can increase with the different concentrations. I just have to be mindful. But long story short is that you have to feed your garden. And so that's what I'm learning. After I had did this research, I believe it was yesterday, I thought about my past gardening season, and my flowers were beautiful, and I thought about how lush looking my tomatoes appeared to be. However, they produced some, but they didn't produce a lot. Same thing with my cucumber seedlings. They started out lush and pretty, but then they didn't produce to what I thought they should have produced. And so now that I'm thinking about it, changing my fertilization product probably would have made a difference. So we'll see. I'm big on research, I'm big on testing, and so we will see if this makes a difference. So moving from, I usually use the Alaska fish fertilizer, and I believe it is 511, it may be 500, I can't remember right off the concentrations. However, this is what I'm using now. Now I do know that you can get these different liquid concentrations. However, from my research yesterday, it seemed like those liquid concentrations were not available in stores. I would need to order those. And so being the person that I am, I knew I wanted to fertilize today and not put it off longer than what I had to. And so I did my research and found the products that could fit my needs currently while I continue to research. So first off, what I've learned is that tomatoes, they love nitrogen, as well as like my watermelon seedlings and my other melons. So to fulfill that need, I opted to use the Miracle Gro All Purpose plant food. And so it is a 12-4-8. So it is 12% nitrogen, 4% phosphorus, and 8% potassium. And so what I did was, I also found out that lettuce, spinach, kale, and collards, they are also nitrogen loving plants. And so I followed the directions to dilute this in my container. So I used this container. And let me just go back a second. Something else that I did before even doing this was I went through my garden and watered everything, because from what I read is that you want to make sure everything is watered first to make sure that once you use your fertilized solution, that it's going to spread evenly. So I watered everything first. Then for my nitrogen loving plants, so my tomatoes, my kale that I have growing, I have some lettuce seedlings that haven't really sprouted yet, so I need to start some more lettuce. But I mixed this in according to the directions within this with some water. And so I just went through and I watered everything with this. And so after that, my other seedlings that I have in the garden, such as my cucumbers, my strawberries, my peppers, I learned from research that they tend to prefer phosphorus and potassium. Nitrogen is good in making the leaves lush and green. However, when it comes to the fruit that they bear, they prefer the phosphorus and the potassium. And so for that, in doing my research, I got the Alaska More Bloom. Now let me say this. This was purchased from Lowe's. This one was purchased from Tractor Supply. Now Lowe's has this one as well, but the Lowe's next to me did not have this one in stock. It was all the way across town, and so I didn't want to have to go across town, so I got this one from Tractor Supply. And so this one has the 0 10 10. So how it breaks down is it doesn't have any nitrogen in it. It has 10% of phosphorus and 10% of potassium. And so what I did with this was I, of course, measured it. It says 1 tablespoon. Depending on the flowers, it may be 2 tablespoons, but I just did the 1 tablespoon because this is my first time trying it. And I mixed it in, of course, again, in this with water. Fill this container up with water. And then I just went through and watered my phosphorus and potassium loving plants. Now, I need to say this too, that even though I did that, kind of did it separately, some of the other plants still got some of the nitrogen, and some of the other ones still got some of this solution. So it would make sense for me to get a solution that has like a good concentration across the board. And again, over here, my thing is I learn as I grow. And so, but for now, with what is available to me in my community, this is the solution that I opted for at the moment, and it may change. So the Alaska More Bloom was about $12. And then, but this is a, let's see, it's almost like 1 liter. So this is a good amount. So this is gonna last me a little bit. And of course with liquid fertilizer, from what I've learned is you can, depending on the fertilizer or the type of flower, you can do this every 7 to 14 days. Or this one, same concept with how often you do it, but this one here, it was about $10. So about $22 for plant food that should last a little while for me. And so I think I'll have a good return on my investment with the produce that will come forth because of the food that I am feeding my plants. But the other thing that I did do research on is whether or not, because it was something that I mentioned in one of my prior videos, was with my flowers, especially my sunflowers. I wanted to know if I needed to stake them. So from what I read, you really don't have to stake sunflowers, but it just depends on also the type. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to watch them, Because something else that I learned from another growing season is that sometimes you can use sunflowers to stake some of your other growing veggies. I think I saw that you could possibly use them as stakes for cucumbers, but don't quote me on it exactly. I can't remember right off, but I have read that you can use it to stake other growing plants, use it as a trellis. But for me right now, I'm not going to stake them. And then I guess I need to also mention that my flowers, they also received some of the fertilizer as well. I more so did the more bloom with the 0 10 10, really with some of my different flower varieties. But going back to what I said prior, some of them also receive the nitrogen. So we'll just see what happens. You know, the plants will get what they need. Ultimately, the goal is to just feed them. That's the long term thing, or that's the short term thing of what I'm trying to get at. You want to feed them. Um, and then the other thing that I'm going to consider too is that I can also use like the granulated fertilizer. And I have some bone meal in the house, and from what I read, that's the one that's high in like the phosphorus and the potassium. But with that, being that it is not liquid and it is slow release, it can take, you know, you usually do that every 6 to 8 weeks. It just depends. So that's one of my other options too. But basically, you do have to feed your garden because, yes, your soil and your compost may supply some of the nutrients that it needs, but it's not going to supply everything that it needs. Okay. Alrighty, so that is the end of that update. I just wanted to give you some details on what I'm doing as far as fertilizing in my garden. Right now, my plan is to do this every Sunday. If I don't do it on Saturdays, because I want to be consistent with when I fertilize everything. And then we'll go from there. You know, over here, I am always learning as I grow. And my goal is to make sure I share this, especially for Zone AA. All right, as always, I will chat with you soon. Bye.